So every request we want to log it, we want to see it. Recently there was another one of those days at work. Everything was broken and burning and people were coming and saying, "Hey Michael, this user is having this terrible problem, this weird bug. Could you please fix it?" And I'm okay, I'm gonna try. Let's see what I can do. So I look into the database and everything there is perfectly fine and normal. So there's no obvious problem there and I'm pretty much in the blind. Why am I in the blind? Because we don't have a proper logging system and I would need a proper logging system to see what happened to the user or to the system in general. One step would be to have error handling with something like Sentry, error monitoring, where you see all the errors that happen. But when there's like a subtle bug that you don't really see, you want to see the whole context, hence the logging. Unfortunately, we did not really have any proper logging system in place, and there's some logs you could look at, but they were really unergonomic or pretty much unusable. And this was a novel situation for me because at my previous job there was a really well-established logging system. However, I didn't really ever use it there because we didn't really have these kinds of problems. The code was more robust and yeah, the problems we had at my old job were basically deeper and the logs wouldn't have helped you there much. So here we had a really simple problem on our hands. We needed better logs to be less blind. So I decided to implement a logging system on my own, and I found out that there's some really easy wins that you can achieve, but it goes quite deep and that's for another video. So here are the 20% effort you can have for 80% of the impact. Some low-hanging fruits on how to do a professional logging system that are sort of the result of my research. So you can simply just log things to the console and somehow capture that. But there's like more professional ways. What I did is I used the Typescript library Winston to take care of the logging and the formatting. And you can have it printed to console or to a file. But also the other option is to just send the logs to a database table, which I also did. So covering all these different ways you can log things, I'm gonna show them to you here and how to do it in a nice way. We want to interject all the routing that goes on. So every request we want to log it, we want to see it. To do this, we use router.use like so with a logging middleware that we import. For the logging middleware, we create a file here, and first we define the function login middleware, which takes in a request and a response and the next. We are most interested in the request. Here we will call the send logging function, which we will declare in a bit. After that, we will call the next to go to the next middleware or the route itself. Now we need to send logging. For that, we declare the input type here, logging input, which takes message, method, data payload, query payload, and params. We define send logging with the logging input, and we have a try catch so that the errors of logging don't escalate. We use logger.info to print it to the console, and we send the log to the database. Now we have two new things we have to take care of. Now we have two new things we have to take care of. The database entry, the database entity or table that stores all the logs, and alternatively also we can have the logger that logs somewhere. Let's first go to the logger. In logger.ts we want a generic logging function that can do whatever we want. So let's define it, but let's actually use Winston, the Winston create logger method. So for this we use the Winston package, and this will take the heavy burden from us. It will make it much more easy for us to do stuff. We ignore the default meta because we don't need it for now. We give it some basic formatting where we add timestamp and JSON. Interestingly, there are transport you can provide. We provide a stream which helps writing to the file, but we also provided the console, which will print out everything to the console. And then, because we want different loggings to different files, I added this for typeorm, which will come in handy later to print out all the typeorm SQL statements into a file. And also something like a Salesforce integration. These can then be logged to different files, which is quite helpful because you don't have to look into the same bucket where everything is crisscross. You can just look in the Salesforce bucket, the Salesforce logging file, for instance. Next, let's see what's going on with the debugging logs create entity. Again, we create a new file, debugging logs.ts, and we import some basic stuff. We call it debugging logs, extend the typeorm class, and we provided a column of message method. So message is just whatever message we provide to give it. Method could have been more like type or something. I wasn't sure what to name it. Data payload for the data of the request, and query for the query, and params for the params. A good way to log all the SQL statements that typeorm translates to is to either enable in the settings logging true, but this will pollute your terminal a lot. So I also recommend enabling a custom typeorm logger. And this confused me a bit, but here it's really quite simple. You import it, and then where you import it from, you can just create your own class where you import stuff. I call it typeorm logger. And with this, we can just have different levels. And here the important one was the log query, where I just call the typeorm logger that I previously defined. Remember, it's this thing here. It's just another Winston logger that writes to a file. I define it, I call it here, and I give it some information. And I do the same for log query error and log query slow, which I don't expect will be logged very much. And this then allows me to nicely log the typeorm. And also here the log schema build. I hope you found this little nugget of knowledge helpful. I hope it makes your day a bit better. And speaking of better days, I hope you have a really good one. Bye.